Guten Tag, IB Econ. We have a new video today. It's the Bee's Knees by the big cheese himself, Mr. Linegar. Let's make history today as we jaw over our Unit 1 review video, Introduction to Economics. But first, let's do our daily punishment. What did the grape say when it got crushed? Nothing. It just let out a little whine. All right, guys, there are 4 units on the IB Economics scope and syllabus. Unit 1 is by far the shortest. We're just going to breeze through it right now and talk about Unit 1. So getting started, Adam Smith is one of the people you should know. He is the father of modern-day economics. He wrote an inquiry into the nation of causes and wealth of nations. It's mostly called The Wealth of Nations. He believed in the idea of the free market, one where consumers may buy what they like and producers may produce what they like with no or limited government interference. The idea of laissez-faire and the idea of the invisible hand, which is market forces from supply and demand, meeting an equilibrium price, come from his brilliant mind. So just some basic information about economics. Economics is a social science. It's a study of how people in society and how they interact with each other. Goods and services. Goods are physical, tangible items you could buy. Services are non-physical, non-tangible items you could buy and sell, like haircuts. One of the big components of economics is everything is finite. We have like finite resources, but we have infinite wants. That's going to lead to the idea of scarcity. Economics is the study of a rationing system. It's how scarce resources are allocated to fulfill our desires. All economic agents, whether they are consumers, producers, or the government, must make choices about how to allocate the scarce resources available to them. This is how we study and why we study economics and why it's so cool. Because it can be physical and non-physical items. All goods and services that have a price are relatively scarce. If something does have a price, it is being rationed. Economics choice is very important. People have to decide how they will allocate their finite resources to acquire scarce goods. And this leads us to opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the next best alternative foregone when an economic decision is made. It's what you give up in order to have something else. So, for example, you choose to come to class today instead of playing video games at home. The opportunity cost is the lack of video games you played. It's never expressed in a monetary value. There are a few exceptions like free goods, like air, but for the most part, everything has an opportunity cost. That's why economists say there is no such thing as a free lunch. The 3 basic economic problems, which are going to lead to different systems of government, economical systems, are what should be produced, how to produce it, and whom they should be produced for. What to produce, how to produce it, and whom for. Who answers these questions? It really depends on the type of economy you have, whether you have a free market, a planned economy, a mixed economy, or even a traditional economy. The things you definitely should remember from earlier in the year are the factors of production. Factors of production are very important for any type of economy. There are resources that allow an economy to produce an output. Land includes any type of natural resources. It could include land itself or like minerals or oil or land underneath it. Labor is the human factor. It's the physical and mental contribution to production. Capital comes with like machinery, investment that are used to make products. So like an assembly line is an example of capital. And entrepreneurship or management is the organizing and risk-taking needed to run entrepreneurship, to run a business. The use of personal money, advertisements, investment, all of those things fall under entrepreneurship. Factors of production are very important. When a country finds new factors of production or they increase the quality or quantity of factors of production, it does lead to long-term economic growth. And we're going to start talking about our first graph here, the wonderful production possibilities curve. Some people like to be spicy and call the production possibilities frontier, but it's all the same. And the production possibilities curve shows the concept of scarcity, choice, and opportunity cost. It shows the maximum combinations of goods and services that can be produced by an economy where they could choose between two goods in a time period. It's assuming that all resources are being fully used and efficiently. The state of technology is fixed, ceteris paribus. And it allows us to understand what's unobtainable, what's inefficient, what's efficient, and how to get long-term growth. So here's a production possibilities curve right here. If you look right here, what this could show us is the difference between, here we go, guns and butter. At point B, they are producing a lot of guns and a lot of very little butter. If they go from point B to point D, the opportunity cost is they're giving up making guns and they're making more butter instead. Everything has an opportunity cost. There are examples of inefficient economy. Point A is inefficient. If it goes from point A to point D, it goes from inefficient to efficient. Point X is impossible unless there's long-term economic growth. That's by increasing the quantity and qualities of the factors of production, increase in human capital, so like education or migration, immigration, improvement in technology, new discoveries. When we talk about actual growth, this is making better use of resources. So actual growth would be like, when we get at macroeconomics, it's a shift of AD from a recessionary gap. It's going from like point A to point C. That is actual growth. Potential growth is a shift of the PPC where you get a whole new one. This is long-term growth. This is caused by increasing the quantity and quality of the factors of production, increasing technology. You see this in the aggregate graphs with LRAS shifting. Just so you know, there are some different types of graphs. We have the increasing opportunity cost, one right here, and we have the constant opportunity cost, one right here. You can also have non-parallel shifts on the production possibilities curve, just basing on whether one thing shifts or affects one thing more than the other. This is a non-parallel shift right here. It's going more to good X than good Y. Same thing right here. This would be like, for example, for the robot and corns, we could say there's a new type of fertilizer found that allows corn to grow faster. So you're going to see it shift more on the corn side and very little on the robot side because they do not use fertilizer. Let's talk about what utility is. Utility is a measure of usefulness and pleasure. It's more than just like happiness. Utility could be getting a shot, but I don't exactly dance for joy when I get a shot. When we look at total utility, it's a total satisfaction gained from consuming a certain quantity of a product. And marginal utility, and this is going to be really big to when we get to the externalities graph, is the extra utility gained from consuming one more product or one more unit of a product. And our utility does diminish over time the more we consume something. That's called diminishing marginal utility. So like when I had one cookie, I might get 10 utility out of it. I might get 10 pleasure. But after I've had 72 cookies, I might only get maybe 2 or 3 pleasures from it because I'm physically thrown up. Let's talk about what positive and normative economics are. Positive economics are concerned with describing and analyzing economic relationships and making factual and objective claims. It's concerned with facts and what's happening. So examples, the unemployment rate in Spain is higher than the unemployment rate in Austria. An increase in income tax will cause a fall in consumer spending. Those are positive economic statements. Normative economics are concerned with how things should be done and deal more with policy. There are more opinion-based statements. So examples of these are the Spanish government has too little emphasis on lowering unemployment. That's a normative economic statement. Let's talk about the circular flow model. The circular flow model shows the amount of incoming flows of money into a country and how it's being spent and the different parts it's being spent. In a perfect circular flow, the injections will equal the leakages. That is a market that has trade. A closed one has no trade. The circular flow model will show the importance of interdependence, how houses are dependent on firms to pay for labor, how households are dependent on financial sector to borrow money, households are dependent on the foreign producers for imports they can't get at home, and households are dependent on the government. And we use households as an example, but that really goes with all of them. So here's a closed circular flow model without any international trade. It shows the different components right here. The circular flow model is one of the graphs you do need to know and be able to draw. It can be on the IB exam. The next one right here is the open circular flow model. Along with this little, the closed circular model right here, we also have outflows and inflows. Inflows are money going into the economy, like government spending, investment, financial investment, and exports. Outflows are money leaving the country, like taxes, savings and banks, and imports. We're going to talk now a little bit about some of the economic systems. The first one is a command economy. This is how the government decides what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. It's made by the central body. Resources are usually collectively owned, and decisions are made by the government for the people. Some of its disadvantages are it's too complicated to work, resources will not be used effectively, incentives tend to be distorted. That's a really big one because economics is all about incentives. It could lead to a loss of personal liberty, and it may not represent the will of the majority. The next one is the free market economy. Prices are used to ration goods and services. All productions in a private hands and demand and supply are left free to set wages and prices. When producers and consumers work in their own best interest, the market is operating correctly. There are disadvantages for a free market system. It does lead to an increase of demerit goods due to lack of regulations. Merit goods will be underprovided. We'll definitely talk about that in Unit 2. It can lead to problems with environmental sustainability. Some members in society will be abandoned, and large farms may grow too big. As far as economic growth can be measured by adding up expenditures, goods and services, rents, wages, interest, profits. There's a lot of way to look at economic growth and look at national income, which was the first one. You can also look at real national income, which takes out inflation. When we talk about economic growth, one of the things we use a lot is GDP. This is the total value of the money in the economy they made in a year using the expenditure method, consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. We'll sometimes look at GDP per capita on how much the average is per person instead of by the country. That gives us a better idea. In IB, we'll look at GNI more often, which we'll talk about GNI next unit, Unit 3, actually. Economic development is a measure of well-being, not just a measurement of growth. It weighs not just GDP, but also other indicators, education, health, society. The Human Development Index is one of the big measurements you should know. The HGI looks at real national income per capita, adult literacy rates, average years of schooling, and life expectancy. High levels of economic development don't ensure equity. That is one of the things you should know. And if you look right here, we have our beautiful United States Sustainability Developmental Goals. You do actually need to know these for the IB exam. We've done a project on them, but you do need to know these goals. These are the 17 goals that they have, that the United Nations have put on for countries for development. For sustainable development, economic growth cannot continue at the expense of the environment. So what we look at is the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. So sustainable development is one of the things that IB, Econ, and economics in general do look at. It's become a bigger deal within the last 30, 40 years. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of economics. In the before Adam Smith, the dominant economic system was mercantilism. This is how European countries, mother countries, would try to maximize their profit by dominating other lands, forcing them to trade with them, and controlling raw resources and raw products. Examples of mercantilism will be like in American history with like the Tea Act, the Sugar Act, forcing the colonies in a subservient role to trade with them. Mercantilism does focus on using tariffs and protectionism. Adam Smith is going to change a lot of the economic ideals and mores and norms with his Wealth of Nations. He said wealth is not based on gold and silver, but instead on the value of goods and services. The goal of government should be to maximize the country's output. It should be to try to increase production and productivity per worker. Adam Smith talked about the idea of specialization in jobs. He also came up with the idea of the labor theory of value, that the value of a price of a good is the sum value of all the labor that was used in producing the good. He came up with the idea of the invisible hand, laissez-faire, that the government should not be involved in the economy, the idea of utility. He did have some idea that the government should have some role, defense, education, essential infrastructure, legal rights, and punishment of crime. Once we get to the 1800s, things do change. David Ricardo comes up with the idea of comparative and absolute advantage and really pushes for free trade in Great Britain. Jean-Baptiste Say was a Frenchman. He was part of the neoclassical movement still. He's going to say that supply is the actual source of all demands in the economy. He came up with the famous phrase, supply creates its own demand. There can be no overproduction within an economy. Economic growth, therefore, that could be produced by focusing on increased production as a means of generating further demand for products. He did reject, though, government intervention within the market. Later on in the 19th century, we got more ideas with like Alfred Marshall. That's really late 1800s. And really, you get the school of microeconomics. You get the law of diminishing marginal utility, the idea of externalities. We get some of the general big ideas of economics that producers and consumers are rational actors within the economy, and they have the full idea when making choices. Karl Marx is going to promulgate the idea of communism in the late 1800s. This was the idea that capitalism would break down because it would create a system of haves and have-nots. And he wanted a command economic system where the government owned the means of production and there was no private property. After the Great Depression in the 1930s, we will get Keynesian economics from John Maynard Keynes. Some of the big idea of Keynesian economics are this: the idea that you should use aggregate demand government spending to get an economy out of a recession. Keynes said that prices were sticky, so the economy would not self-correct, which is what neoclassicists believe. They believe the economy will self-correct. The role of government is to slow the depression and bring the economy out of it. He pushed for the idea of intervention in the marketplace, fiscal policy. Keynesians will use the idea of monetary policy as well. And he did push the idea that the government should and can run a deficit to help the economy when needed. Here's the business cycle, which we'll talk more about later on. The neoclassical economics is going to get a rebirth in the 1970s. It's mostly focused on monetary policy, the importance of inflation and balancing it out, and really using the money supply and the tools of the central banks to do this. They believe that if there's an expansionary policy, this will cause the average price level to go up. As a result, real wages should then go up to keep pace with inflation. The best way to grow economies on the supply side. Neoclassicists and supply-side economists were similar. Some of them believed in both camps, but they weren't necessarily the same thing. Milton Friedman was a neoclassicist. Even Keynesians now believe in monetary policy, but you will have neoclassicists. 1970s, 1980s, you'll get supply-siders, and they're going to focus on trying to do long-term growth, deregulation, tax cuts to cause potential growth in the economy. Lastly, we have behavioral economics, which unfortunately we won't really talk about that much in SL. Um, Economic thought is based on the idea that consumers are rational actors. This is not always the case in the real world. Consumers can be nudged to make decisions that are actually not good for them or good for society. So behavioral economics is super interesting. You're going to love it next year for those of you in HL. Just real fast, just a couple of things. There is a movement right now in economics away from the take, make, waste economy towards a more circular economy, which is more emphasis on design, maintenance, repair, refurbishment, and remanufacturing of products. The other new economic system, which is also gaining prevalence, is the idea of a donut economy, which focuses really on ecology. The economic goals and models and theories must be adapted to ensure that we operate within a safe place, working towards a world where people's human needs and rights are met within the environment limits of the earth. So these are just some new ideas, new ways of looking at economics that have become more predominant within the last 20, 30 years. All right, kiddos, that is all I have for you for this first review video over Unit 1. Until next time, deuces, 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 yeah.